Well, hello everybody. It's Comrade Dankey here again today with a video about our favorite topic of all time, the skeptic community. Specifically the YouTube skeptic community. When Dankey was, a young man and I was still in high school, I had been born and raised in the Southern Baptist Church, which is extremely reactionary, extremely conservative. They are essentially a propaganda wing of the Republican Party here in the United States. We were taught that the world was 6,000 years old, that Noah's flood actually happened, that evolution was a lie pushed by big science to discredit the Bible. And of course we were taught that the Bible was true. So when young Dankey finally got a hold of the computer, first of all, I watched a lot of porn. But in between those sessions of watching porn, I watched the Atheist Experience. I watched Aaron Ra. I watched Thunderfoot. I watched all these YouTube skeptics. I listened to Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens. I felt like I had been enlightened, not because of any phony God's blessing, but because I had been enlightened by my own intelligence. Tips Fedora. If you get that reference, shout out to you. But over the years, I witnessed this sort of slow degradation of the skeptic community. And usually, I would say it started with Atheism Plus, which Atheism Plus was sort of an effort to take the revolutionary momentum of the new atheist movement and package it in a social justice format. Hey, you don't like the religious right? Great. Women activists don't like the religious right. LGBT activists don't like the religious right. Black activists don't like the religious right. Nobody likes the religious right over here on the left. So it makes perfect and total sense for a community of new atheists to side with these groups, to take up the charge and lead the charge on LGBT rights in this country. Unfortunately, that's not what happened. Unfortunately, the skeptic community, and I say skeptic as ironically as possible, the skeptic community was dominated by straight white men. And that's not a bad thing in and of itself. The problem was that people of color, women, other minorities, their opinions were being essentially pushed down and suppressed. And the opinions of these privileged, white, bougie, partially Western chauvinist skeptics, these white skeptics, sort of rose to the top. So you had sort of a schism created where certain skeptics sided with Atheism Plus, decided to embrace intersectionality and social justice, and others rejected it. Many of the most prominent members of the skeptic community, people that I looked up to and admired, found themselves embracing the reactionary side of this schism. And it just goes to show you can call yourself logical and reasonable and rational, and you can still buy in to some of the most dipshit ideology you'd ever see in your whole life. The most reactionary bigotry you'd ever see. I saw these smarty boy, big brain, galaxy brain skeptics fall hook, line, and sinker into the anti-SJW propaganda that currently permeates all over YouTube. I saw the skeptic community collectively shift focus away from creationism and conservative Christianity and push all of their efforts onto attacking Tumblr feminists. Tumblr feminists. They would find a quote from like some 12-year-old girl on Tumblr that says, "I don't think men should exist." And they blow that up and they say, "Here's what all feminists believe. Isn't that fucking crazy?" Completely strawmanning the feminist movement, completely strawmanning social justice, completely strawmanning the left. And for a time, young Dankey bought into this sort of reactionary bullshit. For a time, young Dankey considered calling himself not a feminist, but a gender equalist. It was a very cringy time in my life, ladies and gentlemen. But I decided to do what all these skeptics don't really do, which is their due diligence, to examine the other side of the argument. This is how I became a skeptic in the first place. I was a creationist. I was a Christian before I became a skeptic. I just decided, fuck, you know, if the Bible is true, it should be able to be proven. So I went out looking for evidence, and wouldn't you know it, the evidence led me to skepticism. All of a sudden, all these skeptics are saying SJWs are bad, feminism is bad, leftism is bad, identity politics bad, all of these things bad. Well, let me go look at them. Let me look at social justice. Let me examine feminism. Let me examine leftism. And wouldn't you know it, I'm a leftist now. So it's like these people, the buck stopped with when they got uncomfortable. They were totally comfortable calling out mommy and daddy and saying, "I'm not gonna go to church anymore, mom and dad. Church is dumb, and God is dumb, and Jesus is dumb." But the second that they were hit with questions like white privilege, the second they were hit with questions like what to do with the sort of political momentum behind our movement, they sat there twiddling their fingers. Or they pointed the fingers at the SJWs and said, "These people are the problem. They're literally just as bad as the reactionary Christians." These so-called skeptics literally said that the feminist social justice warriors were just as bad as the conservative Christians. You know, the conservative Christians that advocate for taking away women's rights, taking away gay rights, taking away trans rights, suppressing ethnic and cultural minorities, trying to push their religious agenda on this entire country, trying to make everybody believe what they believe and think how they think and live how they think everyone should live. The skeptic community turned their backs to every vulnerable, targeted group of people that were immersed in these religious environments. All of the kids that were growing up in homeschooling and they were being inundated with creationist propaganda and reactionary conservative propaganda on a day-to-day basis. Kids who went to private Christian schools. People who were raised in an environment where they literally had only one opinion taught to them their entire life. You guys, the skeptics, you were their lifeline. You were the ones who were helping them to deprogram themselves from their religious indoctrination. You were the ones that I looked up to. Because, as I said, I used to be a creationist. So if it wasn't for you skeptics doing the hard work and debunking creationist arguments, fuck, I might still be a creationist. So to see all of these skeptics sort of abandon that battlefield, let the religious right just completely dominate, and they turn all their attention on these social justice warriors, which are really a non-issue. If anything, you should advocate social justice, but you're turning on them. I have seen the skeptic community abandon all of the tenets that they claimed made them unique as a community. They abandoned a healthy skepticism and completely bought into this reactionary bullshit propaganda about SJWs and feminists. Literally every single one of these skeptics think that all SJWs are like Big Red or like Trigglypuff. They can't see the nuance. Their brains are so big and galaxy-sized they can no longer see the fine, nuanced details. They instead categorize all social justice warriors as this broad camp of idiots that they are trying to rally against. And in doing so, they culled a lot of their truly most revolutionary members. They culled a lot of female skeptics, a lot of gay skeptics, trans skeptics. They were all pushed out of the community because it became obvious to everybody that the skeptic community was a white man's club. And it was a straight white man's club at that. Absolutely disgraceful. And so now people sit back in 2019 and they think, what the fuck happened to the skeptic community? How did they fall so far and become so irrelevant now? And I would argue that they're not irrelevant. They have just shifted their purpose. They're no longer skeptics. They are firmly rooted in the anti-SJW reactionary YouTube sphere. They have abandoned all interest in trying to tackle religious indoctrination. They have completely bought into trying to trigger the libs. This entire movement, which claimed to be sort of the inheritors of Western logic and reason, you fizzled out when you bought into anti-SJW hysteria. So much for the Western, tradition of skepticism and rational thought. You abandoned it at the slightest inconvenience. Fucking hilarious. So the skeptic community is an absolute shame. It is an absolute disgrace. And it is a shadow of what it used to be. And it is barely even a whisper on the wind as to what it could have been. Let's think about this for a minute. What if the new atheist community had accepted and embraced social justice in all earnesty? We would probably be looking at sort of a leftist YouTube renaissance here on YouTube. Now, I'm sure that the majority of these content creators wouldn't be hardcore dedicated Marxist, but at the same time, it would be miles better than dealing with the droves and droves of reactionary skeptic bros that we have nowadays. So, being somebody who used to sort of associate with the skeptic community, who used to call themselves a skeptic, who used to be proud of calling themselves an atheist, someone who's actually met Matt Dillahunty in person. I met the guy in person and I told him that I looked up to him, that he was a hero of mine. To see this guy completely buy into this reactionary bullshit anti-social justice propaganda, it's such a shame. It just goes to show that if you put your eggs in the skeptic basket, prepare to have those eggs fall and break, because the skeptic basket is one woven with false arguments, reactionary politics, and fears. That's all it is. That's the skeptic community. It's just white male fears. And congratulations, you no longer have to go to church on Sunday, but you also threw the trans community under the bus, women under the bus, gay people under the bus, leftist under the bus. Pretty much anybody who would be in your corner rooting for you, you threw them under the bus. So have fun kissing up to the religious right that you now cater to with your anti-social justice rhetoric. Have fun kissing up to them. I'm sure they would be more than willing to welcome atheists with open arms. You fucking idiots. But anyway, that's my opinion on the so-called skeptic community. An absolute disgrace and a sham. A shadow of its former self. which was never really that great to begin with. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Dankey Kang out.